It was supposed to be a normal day until I said one word my family never expected to hear. My mother's face changed, her voice shook, and suddenly everyone was asking the same question in panic. That was the moment I learned how fast love can turn into pressure when boundaries are crossed. My name is Ella. Before this story begins, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching this from, and what time is it right now? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one. My name is Ella, and before everything fell apart, my life was built on silence the kind that looks peaceful from the outside but hums with unspoken expectations. Our house was always full, yet it never felt crowded with warmth. Every room carried invisible rules, when to speak, when to agree, when to sacrifice. I had learned them early. Be responsible. Be grateful. Be available. That evening, the air felt heavier than usual, as if the walls themselves were waiting for something to happen. My mother moved through the kitchen with sharp, efficient steps, the sound of plates clinking like warnings. My younger siblings sat on the couch, scrolling on their phones, unaware of the shift in gravity. I stood near the doorway, rehearsing words I had practiced for weeks, knowing once spoken, they could never be taken back. I wasn't planning a fight. I was planning honesty. But in families like mine, honesty often sounds like rebellion. The sun dipped lower, shadows stretching across the floor. And with it came the realization that tonight would change everything. I didn't know how loud the fallout would be. Only that staying silent had already cost me too much. I took a breath, steady but afraid, and stepped forward. Dinner hadn't even been served when my mother asked the question that cracked the surface of everything I had buried. It was casual on the outside, wrapped in concern, but sharp underneath. She spoke about plans, about needs, about what the family expected next from me. As she talked, everyone listened the way they always did, assuming my agreement before I opened my mouth. I felt my chest tighten. This wasn't new. It was a pattern. My time, my money, my future neatly assigned without my consent. I glanced around the table, searching for an ally, but found only lowered eyes and quiet chewing. That's when I realized the moment had arrived. If I didn't speak now, I never would. My voice came out calmer than I felt. I said no, just one word. No explanation yet. No argument, just a boundary. The room froze. Forks paused midair. My mother blinked, as if she hadn't heard me correctly. Silence stretched, uncomfortable and loud. I could feel every heartbeat in my ears. That single word hung between us, fragile and explosive, waiting to be touched. What do you mean, no? My mother asked, her tone tightening like a pulled wire. I tried to explain, slowly, carefully, choosing words that wouldn't sound like blame. I spoke about exhaustion, about needing space, about wanting a life that wasn't entirely shaped by obligation. But explanations didn't soften the blow. They made it worse. Her voice rose, not all at once, but in Rafe's confusion turning into disbelief, disbelief into anger. She stood up so fast her chair scraped loudly against the floor. The question that followed wasn't about me anymore. It was about survival. About fear masked as outrage. She shouted, demanding to know how the family would manage without my sacrifice. The room filled with noise, emotions spilling over years of restraint. My siblings stared in shock. I stood still, hands shaking, realizing that my boundary had been interpreted as betrayal. In that moment, I understood how deeply my role had been carved into their expectations, and how dangerous it felt to step outside it. The argument didn't end when the shouting stopped, it only changed shape. The air stayed thick, heavy with words that had already done their damage. My mother paced the room, listing every sacrifice she had made. Every night she went without so we could have more. Each sentence felt like a debt statement, reminding me of what I owed simply for existing. I wanted to say that I never denied her sacrifices, that I carried them with me every day. But whenever I opened my mouth, my voice felt too small to survive the room. My siblings watched silently, frozen between loyalty and fear. No one interrupted. No one defended me. That silence hurt more than the yelling. I realized then that families often confuse obedience with love. The moment obedience breaks, love is questioned. My mother's words weren't just anger, they were panic. Panic at losing control, at the idea that the future she imagined for me might never happen. When she finally stopped talking, her shoulders slumped, and she looked older somehow, tired, hurt. For a second, I almost apologized just to make the pain go away. But something inside me refused. If I apologized now, the boundary would disappear, and this moment would mean nothing. I quietly said I needed space. That sentence landed badly. She turned away without answering, dismissing me with her silence. The conversation was over, but the damage was done. I walked back to my room, every step echoing. Behind me, the house returned to noise, TV sounds, dishes, movement, but none of it felt normal anymore. I had crossed an invisible line, and there was no map for what came next. That night stretched endlessly, as if time itself had slowed to watch me suffer. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, counting cracks, listening to the faint sounds of my family moving on without me. Every noise felt like a reminder that I had disrupted something fragile. My phone buzzed with messages from friends, but I couldn't bring myself to reply. How do you explain that standing up for yourself can feel worse than staying silent? Guilt crept in quietly, wrapping itself around my thoughts. What if I really was selfish? What if independence was just a pretty word for abandonment? I replayed my mother's words again and again, each replay adding another layer of doubt. But alongside the guilt lived exhaustion, the deep, bone-level exhaustion of someone who has given too much for too long. I thought about all the times I said yes when I meant no, all the plans I postponed, all the dreams I told myself could wait. Waiting had become my entire life. Around midnight, tears finally came, not dramatic or loud, but steady and heavy. Crying felt like releasing years of pressure at once. Somewhere in that quiet breakdown, I understood something important. Pain doesn't automatically mean you're wrong. Sometimes pain is proof that you touched a truth you've been avoiding. By the time the house fell completely silent, I made a decision not about my family, but about myself. I would not take my words back. Even if the cost was loneliness, I would face it. Morning didn't bring relief. It brought distance. Breakfast was quiet, polite, painfully awkward. My mother avoided my eyes, speaking only when necessary. My siblings acted normal on the surface, but their laughter felt forced, fragile. I realized conflict doesn't always look like shouting sometimes. It looks like emotional withdrawal. The house had turned cold, not in temperature, but in spirit. Every interaction felt carefully measured, as if one wrong word could restart the war. I started spending less time at home. Long walks became my escape, giving me space to think without being watched. With every step, clarity replaced fear. I saw patterns I had ignored for years. How my role in the family had slowly erased my individuality. I wasn't just helping, I was disappearing. That realization hurt, but it also strengthened me. Distance gave me perspective, and perspective gave me courage. Still, there were moments when doubt returned. Moments when I questioned whether freedom was worth the emotional cost. But each time I imagined going back to how things were, my chest tightened. I knew I couldn't survive like that anymore. Change was uncomfortable, but staying the same felt impossible. And that difference mattered. The next real conversation didn't happen in anger. It happened in exhaustion. My mother sat across from me, eyes tired, voice softer than before. She asked why I was hurting the family like this. The question wasn't sharp, it was wounded. I took a deep breath and answered honestly. I told her I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. I was trying to stop hurting myself. I explained how responsibility had slowly turned into expectation, how expectation became pressure, and how pressure became suffocating. I told her I loved my family, but love shouldn't demand the loss of identity. My hands shook as I spoke, But I didn't stop. For the first time, I didn't shrink to protect her feelings. I respected my own. She didn't agree. Not fully. But she listened. That alone felt like a small victory. When the conversation ended, nothing was magically fixed. But something had shifted. The silence between us no longer felt like punishment, it felt like processing. And that was enough for now. After that conversation, the path ahead became clearer, even if it wasn't easier. I began making decisions that aligned with who I wanted to be, not who everyone expected me to remain. Small choices at first: how I spent my time, what I prioritized, where I invested my energy. Each decision felt rebellious, even though it was simply honest. Fear followed me constantly. Fear of being judged. Fear of disappointing my family permanently. But for the first time, fear wasn't driving my choices. Purpose was. I realized that choosing myself didn't mean rejecting my family. It meant refusing to vanish for their comfort. That distinction gave me strength. The consequences came quietly, not with explosions, but with emotional distance that slowly softened over time. Some days were heavy with doubt. Other days felt free and light. My family didn't suddenly applaud my independence, but they began to accept it. Respect arrives slowly, built not on agreement, but consistency. I learned that boundaries don't guarantee happiness. They guarantee honesty. And honesty, even when painful, is the foundation of real peace. Each day, I stood a little taller, more certain of who I was becoming. Looking back, I understand now that setting boundaries isn't cruelty, it's courage. That night wasn't the end of my family. It was the end of my silence. My story isn't about rebellion or revenge. It's about choosing to exist fully, even when it's uncomfortable. And if you're watching this while struggling between love and self-respect, remember this: your voice matters, even when it shakes. Especially when it shakes. If you like this revenge story, hit the subscribe button and comment yes.